Pueblo Grande de Nevada. This lost city was once the home of an ancient Anasazi civilization. This giant, ancient, lost city was inhabited from 300 BC until 1150, which is the same date basically given when all of the Anasazi everywhere disappeared, which would have been from 1150 to 1300. That's like a very short amount of time considering how many thousands of years they had inhabited the area before that. And this location is in Overton, probably a 10-minute drive from Valley of Fire State Park in Nevada, where there is more evidence of the Anasazi with petroglyphs. So they have been in this area for a very long time. But by 1150, they were gone. So the Lost City Museum was built in 1935 to preserve the remains of this great civilization. So this was a huge Anasazi sedentary population of farmers. And much of that was destroyed when they were making the Hoover Dam. So I went there on my trip to the Valley of Fire when I was with my mom. And one of the most interesting features that they had when you first get there is an actual underground kiva, and you are able to walk up to the top of it. It's a mound, and it's kind of hollowed out inside. And I wasn't able to go inside, but that's how you enter, from the top with a ladder. I'll read from here. What is in a name? Anasazi is a Navajo word that is variously translated to mean enemy, ancestors, all used up, or ancient enemies. The Navajo do not consider ruins of the Anasazi as their ancestral homes. The Hopi reject the Navajo term as derogatory and prefer to use the Hopi word his at sin. They had a good relationship with these ancient people, and the Navajo, you know, you can't say all of them didn't, but there's a lot of Navajo, and many of the warriors did not like the Anasazi. It says, are the basket makers and the Anasazi the same people? Archaeologists originally thought they were distinctly different people. That means different species. And then it says, it is easier to view these terms' developmental sequence through time. So they were Anasazi, and they were here beginning around 300 BC until suddenly they were gone. And it also coincides with the arrival of certain Native American groups to the area that admittedly didn't like the Anasazi. Okay, it says the Lost City is a series of ruins extending 30 miles in length of the muddy river valley. When early excavation began, the sites were called Pueblo Grande de Nevada, and again dated from 300 BC to 1150 AD, which is interesting because it's the exact same time of the Anasazi disappearance in the Four Corners region, which is pretty far away. The lost city was only lost to the eyes of those who did not recognize the value of the heritage. And outdoors you can see remade examples of storage units. These aren't examples of where they lived. They're storage units. And maybe some of these stone circles are original, but it did say that these were remade. And they also have, right in this area, just so happens, this water source here. The water's just coming up out of the ground, which is very interesting. It says that there used to be an ancient sea here 550 to 250 million years ago. And it advanced and retreated many times for another 400 million years. Most of the gray rocks are made up of the remains of countless plants and animals that once flourished in this warm, shallow sea. So that gray area is where all the fossils are. And then it says there's a muddy mountain thrust. I wonder if that somehow could be related to the mud flood. But then the sea vanishes. 250 to 66 million years ago, the sea vanished. That completely coincides with the natural disaster that killed the dinosaurs. It says 66 million years ago, and, you know, was said to have happened 65 million years ago. And this area isn't that far from the Yucatan, where that comet struck. And it says the red sands you see in front of you were laid down 200 million years ago when the sea retreated for the last time, and the region became a gigantic plain of silts, clay, and gravel with sluggish streams. So, did the sea vanish when the mud came? It says that 70 million years ago to now, since the Muddy Mountain Thrust Fault began to build the huge range across from the Visitors Center, in that time approximately 10,000 feet of deposits have eroded away. So it just sounds like 65 million years ago, the mud was deposited, and that's what changed everything. And from then until now, 10,000 feet of that mud has eroded away. So in this museum, I found it very interesting that they differentiated between the Anasazi and broke them up into 3 groups. 4,000 to 2,000 years ago, 2000 BC to 50 BC, was the gypsum people, and they were barefoot. I made such a big mistake, a beginner's mistake, because I didn't put anything in these pictures for scale. Without that information, it's just so frustrating that I did that. And it's kind of hard to believe that I would do something like that, because I know better. I've mentioned not to do this. So I did it, and now I have no idea how big these feet print were. And I could have found out. This is very hard information to find out when you try to put it in the internet and research it. They don't usually like to give foot sizes or height estimations or anything like that. They say they're half size, but I don't know what that size is. I have to go back, or somebody has to go back with a ruler and find out. Because unfortunately, I don't know. Because I didn't do that research correctly. That being said, it would be great to have known. If you had a ruler, you could tell. But I didn't. And they're talking about different feet print and feet sizes, and Anasazi and the gypsum, and I've heard it mentioned there's a lot of different creatures that were in the area back then, inhabiting the surface of the area, but they all went into hiding when, you know, it became unsafe. And I love this petroglyph that I actually got to see in person, and it clearly shows 2 different species getting along. I think it's so cool. So you can see the gypsum footprint is wide, the toes are spread out, and like I said, nothing for scale. And all along this area is also a bunch of warm springs. We went to this spring called Rogers Warm Springs, I think. And there's a cave there at the top, and there's a cave at the bottom, and the water, the hot water, is coming out of the cave. It's natural hot water. And there's a warning sign not to let the water enter your nose. And I've heard about there's this amoeba common to thermal pools that may enter, causing a rare infection and death. And it enters through your nose. Warning, do not submerge your head. You shouldn't submerge your head in any hot springs, and that's pretty scary. So I still was tempted. There were some fish in there, and I did put my hand in it, and it was warm to the touch. Obviously, it was being heated thermally, geologically, because it was, even though it was warm that day, this water should have been colder to the touch. But it looked very clean and clear, although all around it, you can see that many animals are drinking it, especially the donkeys. You could see that they had been there a lot. I looked for other prints, but mostly just saw those of the donkey. But the water looked clean. Those are fake flowers, and it was running all the way down to the Mead Lake. But it would have been a very important place to natives. And oh, they did have this one amazing map of all of the turquoise mines in all of these states, which is really cool to see like that. That's very cool. And that is my trip to the Valley of Fire in a nutshell, well, with 4 videos. And if you also share in my interest for cryptids and creatures and people from the BC, make sure you hit the like for this video and make sure you're subscribed. And until next time, bye!